Hello guys, today we will be talking about what if Naruto was called as the Shield Hero Part 4. If you enjoy this video please like and subscribe. Now let's begin. In the last hour before the wave, Naruto and his party came together at Harem. Alright, we will start with Charlie formation. Civilians are the priority. Keep an eye on both your mana and your chakra. Do not stray from your partner. Call for help if you need it. We should try to stay close to each other. Jiraiya then said, make sure you have all the potions, salves, bandages, and equipment that you need. Naruto then looked at his party's status and saw, Naruto, level 27, Raflia, level 35, Sovi, level 35, Millie, level 30, Jiraiya, level 32, Rino, level 28. He then checked his shields, small shield, orange, yellow, red balloon shields, leaf shield, fish shield, mush, blush mush, green mush shields, egg, blue egg, sky egg shields, small medicine, small poison shields, doctor shield, energy, potential energy shields, USA meat, use other shields, sharpening shield, pickaxe shield, rope shield, piku shield, wood, rock shields, butterfly shield, pipe shield, iron, copper, silver, lead, light metal shields, slave trainer 3 shield, novice mixing, mortar, beaker, medical research shields, animal needle shield. It continued for a few more, but they were not very interesting. He switched to the light metal shield. He then nodded to himself and felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked to see Sylvie smile warmly at him. The rest of the group looked at him and smiled. He then exclaimed, let's do this. I bet the other heroes go for the main monster and we will have to save civilians first. Irusnin, we're keeping clones secret unless we really need them. Jiraiya nodded and replied, sounds good. We should also not use jutsu in front of guards or the other heroes. Rino stood and she cleared her throat and said, Naruto. I may only speak for myself, but I think I speak for all of your party when I say, we are all behind you and know that you're behind us. I will be your sword through thick and thin. I will follow anywhere. Naruto smiled and blushed. The other girls nodded and replied, we agree. Naruto then said, then we figure out where the wave is and protect the innocents first and then deal with the boss. I'm sure that the other heroes will want to be first to take care of it and leave the people to the mercy of the wave, not realizing what they are doing. So, the first priority is to secure any village and then go after the boss. If we have to, we will let them take care of the boss. Agreed? Everyone in the group nodded and exclaimed, right. Naruto looked at the timer and said, we have about a minute. Check your equipment. Potions and bandages. Rino, Jiraiya will carry you if we need to travel to the location, and then we will take our formation. Rino nodded and replied, yes sir. Naruto then said, 10 seconds. The group waited for the time to tick off. All of them heard a loud gong when the timer hit 0. They were then surrounded by a light and teleported. All of them looked around and Raflia said, the heroes are headed to the heart of the wave, like you predicted. Naruto nodded and then said, we're near Loot Village. Let's go. Jiraiya picked up Rino and the group as a whole jumped off towards the village. They made it there in very little time. Raflia and Sylvie were actually able to cleave a zombie each in two just before it hit the ground. Jiraiya set Rino down and the group looked at Naruto. He then said, Charlie formation for now. Head down the streets and help the villagers. Herd them into a group and then we will get them to safety. Naruto quickly ran with Sylvie behind him. He slid down in front of a zombie to block it from slashing down at a man who was sitting on the ground holding his arm up in defense. Naruto blocked the swing while Sylvie took the head of the zombie. Sylvie asked, are you, alright sir? If so, follow behind us and we will protect you. The man nodded and got up and followed the pair. They then came upon a woman and her daughter who were set upon by some large bees or wasps. Naruto exclaimed, shield prison. And a round barrier made of shields surrounded the pair. The bees bounced off the barrier and then charged Naruto and Sylvie. Naruto changed his shield to the animal needle shield and added speed to his own charge. Sylvie stayed behind and picked off the strays that weren't impaled on the shield. The barrier disappeared and the woman and child looked up to see Naruto and Sylvie kill the last bee. Naruto then said, "Follow us and we will lead you all to a rally point to get you out of here." Now having 3 people following them, they made their way back to the gate and Naruto said, "Rino and Raphlia, you two take the civilians to safety. Come back for more. We will continue to clear out the village." Naruto and Sylvie jumped up onto the top of a building and then saw a large zombie about to kill a villager. Naruto exclaimed, "Airstrike shield. Go, Sylvie." An ethereal shield appeared between the zombie and the man. The zombie lifted its axe and went for another attack, only for it to lose its head to Sylvie's sword. Naruto then said, "Sylvie, I'm going to protect them and you ferry them to the entrance." Sylvie nodded and replied, "Got it. Follow me, sir." The man nodded and followed the bunny girl. Naruto kept the animal needle shield and charged into a locust swarm. He decimated the swarm. He then saw a group of adventurers backed against a wall. He continued his charge and created a Rasengan in his right hand. The Rasengan hit the zombie that was about to attack the adventurer, but its head was demolished by the jutsu. Naruto said, "I'll get their attention, but I want you to do a fighting retreat to the entrance of the village. Most of the villagers are almost evacuated." The man Naruto had saved replied, "As you wish, shield hero. Guys, head back down the block." Naruto then said, "Hey deadheads. Catch me if you can." This seemed to get a lot of attention. Naruto was then masked and swarmed by the monsters. He smiled and made a Rasengan. He then enlarged it to be bigger than himself and spun around. It tore through the massing monsters. He did notice that he had lost some of his hit points, but that was minimal. He saw the last of the adventurers rounding the corner towards the entrance of the village. He then noticed Sylvie coming into view. She was cleaving monsters left and right as she progressed. Naruto smiled widely at this. He then jumped and landed behind her to block an axe from one of the large zombies. She flipped backward and took the head of the zombie with a deft swing of her sword. Naruto then did several hand signs and exclaims, "Fire release, great fireball technique." He breathes out a large fireball that hits a large group of monsters. Sylvie then exclaims, "As the source of my power, I order thee. First fire blast." A fireball hits another group of monsters from her fire magic. Naruto then exclaims, "Water release, water bullet technique." He aimed it at a group of monsters, but also a burning building. This had the effect of hurting the monsters and putting out the fire in the building. Elsewhere in the village, Jiraiya and Millie were running down the streets either using magic, in the case of Millie, or slicing down monsters, in the case of Jiraiya. The civilian saved work around and herded towards the entrance of the village. Jiraiya made sure to only use jutsu of fire and water on most of the monsters. He would use wind on the flying monsters though. The pair cleared about quarter of the village also. Naruto and Sylvie were in the final area trying to clear the village of monsters and were backing out when they noticed several flares. Quarter of the village. Raphlia and Rino were able to clear. Naruto changed his shield to the light metal shield. They had cleared most of the monsters from the area, but not all. The flares were actually spells and appeared to be artillery-type spells that had an area effect. Naruto wrapped Sylvie in his cape and lifted his shield to the incoming spell. The area became a conflagration. Naruto used a long-lasting water bullet to extinguish the fires in the area. An arrogant voice said, "The shield hero? You're a tough one. Oh well, guess we got all the monsters in one shot." Naruto held Sylvie's arm and said, "If this is how you protect your populace, I would hate to see what will be left after the last wave. I'm guessing nothing." The man looked angrily at Naruto and said, "You will watch your mouth, you criminal." Naruto asked, "Or what? You'll die like a valiant warrior to the monsters that came after your spell?" The man growled and then said, "You might be hurt if we slip up." Naruto chuckled and pointed behind the knights. He then said, "You guys might want to get better situational awareness. I'll protect you this once. If you claim you did more than you did, then I'll prank you as you've never been pranked before." He disappeared. The leader of the knights asked, "Where is he?" He then heard a clang right behind him and saw an axe a foot from his head. You didn't defend the people and never claim that you did in this wave. Now either help me take care of this wave or get out of my way, Naruto exclaimed. Sylvie was already running up the arm of the large zombie. She cleaved the head half of the zombie. Naruto and Sylvie began to appear to dance with each other as they began to eliminate the enemies. The leader of the knights said, "Leave the shield hero. We'll help the other heroes." Another man who appeared to be a captain shook his head and said, "Knights, phalanx formation." Naruto chuckled and the leader and a few of his men shook their heads at the group that agreed to stay. He then said, "Leave them. Let's go where we're needed." Naruto and Sylvie continued to weave in and out of the monsters and backed up the knights. Naruto would occasionally use a water jutsu to put out a fire. Raphlia and Reno eventually joined them in keeping the village clear of monsters. About a half hour later the sky changed and the monsters stopped coming. Naruto then exclaimed, "Girls, we're going to clear the village and have the others work on healing those that are safe. We will also look for those who are trapped." The girls nodded and a group moved around the village. An hour later most of the knights had left and his team had assembled. The villagers had returned and Naruto had set up a medical station. Jiraiya acted like a solo adventurer, so as to not attract attention to himself from the knights. Raphlia and Sylvie had collected the bodies of the monsters into a pile outside of the village. They also collected the weapons of the monsters too. Knight Commander said, "These will be confiscated by the crown." Naruto stood against the wall and said, "If you can prove that you collected them, then I have no problem with you doing that. I would have less problem with the village taking a percentage, but the crown? You guys did more damage than the monsters did. Now either get lost or I'll find a monster to feed you to. The spoils of this battle belong to the town and me." Knight Commander angrily replied, "I don't think you understand who you're dealing with." Naruto looked at the man and said, "Oh, I do. You're the one who thinks that he is in control. Remember, I saved your life. Now get out of my sight, before I make disappear and they don't find the body." Knight Commander growled and said, "The king also would like to invite you and the other heroes to a celebration for beating the wave." Naruto raised an eyebrow and replied, "Sure, but let Kinney know that if he pulls anything I'm going to not be pleased and he will not like the consequences." The Knight Commander gasped and asked, "Are you threatening the king?" Naruto shook his head and replied, "As the prankster king of Konoha, it is a promise. Remind him not to mess with me. I am a hero and was brought here against my will to help him out. He will give me some consideration. I did rescue a town in his kingdom and I didn't see him out here and you guys arrived really late." The commander turned and left while making a HMPH sound. Naruto was feeding his shield from the defeated monsters when he noticed an assemblage of the townsfolk. He looked up and the governor of the town said, "Thank you, shield hero. If it wasn't for you our town wouldn't have survived." Naruto scratched the back of his head and replied, "It's okay. My team and I were glad to do it. Part of the job thing." He blushed. The governor shook his head and said, "You went above and beyond. Thank you." Naruto bowed and said, "I would like to negotiate on the salvage of the weapons from the wave." The man looked surprised and asked, "What do you mean, Sir Hero?" "I was going to sell them and give you a percentage of the take to help with rebuilding," Naruto replied. The man smiled and said, "That is most gracious, Sir Hero. We would be happy with whatever you decide is fair." Naruto sighed and said, "Then I guess we can go 50-50 on the weapons and other parts that I have salvaged." Raphlia and Sylvie finally came back with the mutilated corpse of the Chimera. The governor bowed and said, "That is most gracious and we agree to your terms." The rest of the town bowed and began to file back into town. Raphlia said, "They looked like they were really grateful." Naruto nodded and replied, "Yes they did. We need to get the best prices for this stuff we can, so that we can help this town rebuild. We also helped to make sure that as few as possible kids went through what you and Sylvie went through." Break Naruto, the girls and Jiraiya were in the castle at the celebration party. Jiraiya kept his distance to keep an eye on the things happening on the court. Naruto was sitting on a windowsill going over some new information in his help menu. Sylvie brushed by Motoyasu, who reached to grab her, only to be intercepted by mine. Sylvie happily came up to Naruto and said, "This food is great." Naruto asked, "Really?" Sylvie nodded and took a fork and fed it to Naruto. She then asked, "See?" Naruto smiled and then frowned. He then asked, "What do you want, pretty boy?" Motoyasu threw down a glove and said, "I challenge you to a fight." Naruto chuckled and asked, "You litter to challenge me to fight? So, what is this really about? Sylvie is your slave, right?" Motoyasu asked. Naruto nodded and replied, "Yep. Just like the nobility, I have a slave or two. They help. I treat." Motoyasu interrupted, "We're heroes, we shouldn't do that. We come from worlds that don't have that." Naruto raised an eyebrow and asked, "Really? Are you sure that there is no slavery anywhere in your world? Sex slaves, or other types of slaves, or are you just blind?" Ren said, "A hero having a slave. Will he stoop to no level of degradation?" Itsuki replied, "He does have a point. There is still slavery in our worlds, but it is limited." Ren sighed and agreed, "True, but it isn't the norm." Naruto explained, "In this world slavery is the norm. It is also in my world. It is looked down upon, but so are masters who are not good to their slaves. It doesn't matter. I challenge you for Sylvie's freedom." Motoyasu exclaimed. Naruto stood and asked, "So you're challenging me? Then you have something that you're willing to give up and put on the table as collateral for this bet? Or are you just going to challenge me to a fight without anything if I win? That would be forcing me into a fight with nothing for me to accept the challenge." Motoyasu gritted his teeth and said, "If you win things stay the same." "What I mean? I'm the only one who has something to lose. You see, I can't kill you for making this challenge, since I need you to finish off these waves, but you would be taking." Naruto shook his head and said, "You see, that's someone special from me. You also haven't asked if she wants to be away from me. That is just as bad as forcing me to fight. Making me a kind of slave to you. Maybe she likes it how it is. There is a reason for the slave crest, but you wouldn't listen to reason. Also, you don't know who and what you're fighting." Motoyasu laughed and said, "You're just a shielder. You have no attack." Naruto laughed and replied, "So, since you feel you have an advantage, you're going to bully me into doing what you want me to do. Sounds like a real hero like you. In my world and more than likely in yours they call that a bully. Enough. You will accept the challenge, Shield Hero." Altcray exclaimed. Naruto turned to the king and glared at him. The king flinched at the glare. Naruto then said, "You stay out of this or you may not be a respected member of the community anymore. Also, there is no incentive for me to accept. If you are forcing me to do this then you are declaring war upon me. And you do not want to do that." His voice became deep and his eyes changed to violet. "You will accept or I will take your party members away from you. Draw swords." Altcray exclaimed. Naruto's eyes remained violet and he said, "Fine, but you will compensate me if I win or you will not like the consequences." Altcray smiled and said, "You will not threaten the king." Naruto then said, "Sure, I'll threaten you. I will tell your wife. I'm sure that she will want to know about this. She wears the pants in this family and you're just a concubine playing with power." The king flinched and said, "Very well, if you win, I will compensate you." The party was led to a coliseum-like building and Naruto put in a room with a bunch of weapons. Naruto sighed and looked at all the weapons. He heard, "The fight between the shield hero and the spear hero will be a contest. The contest will continue until one is either pinned, gives up, or is unconscious. The contest will begin when the contestants enter the arena." Naruto smirked at the rules and chuckled. He knew what he had to do. The doors opened and he walked down a row of guards into the arena. He then heard, "This contest is official since it is being officiated by both the Pope and the King." Naruto scowled at the officials. Naruto looked around and saw mine on the side of the arena. He then said, "She should move out of the line of fire or she could be hurt or killed. I will not take responsibility for your party member. I also don't want to fight against two combatants at once, but if I have to I can and I will destroy her." I hope she understands that I will make sure that a lot of this area is destroyed. I do no magic. Motoyasu looked surprised and said, "Mine, you should leave the field of battle." Naruto said, "Unless this is a battle between parties and then bring my party down." Motoyasu shook his head and said, "This is a battle between you and me." Naruto began to smile and it got wider and wider. He then said, "You fell into a trap. I'm not just a shielder, I'm a shinobi. You've already lost. I don't care what you think you can do. It won't be enough." Motoyasu shook his head and moved his hair out of his eyes, not really listening to Naruto. He then said, "Have you ever heard of the story of the spear in the shield?" Naruto changed his shield to the light metal shield and chuckled. The spear hero charged and jabbed at Naruto. Naruto sighed at the speed of the jabs. He blocked every one of them and then asked, "So, when the spear didn't penetrate the shield, what happened?" "I would guess that the spearman lost." Motoyasu jumped back and turned his spear. He then said, "I'll admit you've got some moves." Chaos Spear. The speed of the spear increased, but not enough to worry Naruto. Naruto shifted the shield to his left arm and blocked the spear. He grabbed the haft of the spear and kicked Motoyasu in the chin with his right leg. This stunned the man. Naruto then moved his leg to the right and then kicked Motoyasu across the face. This turned the man to the right. Naruto followed it up by jumping over the spear and kicking with his left leg to the face. He let the spear go and Motoyasu went sprawling. Naruto looked at mine and did several hand signs. He then exclaimed, "Water release, water wall." He spat out water that quickly formed a wall around Naruto. Suddenly something hit the wall from the direction of mine, but didn't disrupt the wall. The wall then fell and Naruto had finished another set of hand signs and exclaimed, "I warned you, bitch." Fire release, great fireball technique. A huge fireball headed towards mine. She dived away, as the wall exploded in fire. Naruto then turned to Motoyasu. Naruto then disappeared and appeared behind Motoyasu. He said, "Hey idiot. You've lost. First your teammate interfered and now you lose." Motoyasu turned only to have his feet swept out from under him. Naruto then knelt down upon the chest of Motoyasu. The man shook his head and said, "Hey, get off." Naruto shook his head and replied, "No. You're pinned." He then pointed to where mine was getting up and said, "If you interfere again, I will end you." He then looked down at Motoyasu and said, "Give up or I will make sure that you are hurting for a week at least. Even after a healer works on you." A blue swirling ball appeared in his right hand. Naruto then explained, "This technique is called the Rasengan and it is an assassination technique. I could kill you with it or just hurt you a lot. Now give up or be hurt." Motoyasu tried to struggle but didn't understand that Naruto had affixed himself to the ground with chakra and would not be moved. He then used his left hand to do several hand signs and turned to mine. His eyes purple. Mine flinched and pissed herself. She backed to the entranceway and hid in the hallway. Naruto then looked up at the king and then at the Pope. He then demanded, "Call this match or your hero is going to be hurt. He has lost." Naruto felt a buildup of power and sighed. He jumped off of Motoyasu and landed 10 meters away. Motoyasu exclaimed, "Lightning spear." He pointed the spear up and lightning came down and hit the spear. The man pointed the spear at Naruto and then lightning streaked at Naruto. Naruto dodged out of the way. Naruto then exclaimed, "Fire release, great fireball technique." A fireball headed towards Motoyasu and hit the man, but not directly on. Naruto walked over and looked down at the man. He then said, "You lost before this match started. You underestimated me. I may be only level 29, while you're level 43, but I have actual fighting experience. You don't. Give up and let the healers heal you. You have yet to even touch me and I have beaten you at every turn. Open your eyes." Motoyasu was breathing hard and said, "I'll never surrender to you." Naruto sighed and said, "You do realize that you fought a trained assassin, don't you?" Naruto knelt down on Motoyasu's chest and the man began to cough. He said, "I won't let Sylvie-chan be your slave." Naruto whispered to Motoyasu, You do realize that if she is released from her slave seal that someone else will try to capture her and re-enslave her. The slave crest is only there for her safety. She is free to do as she wishes. I have no real control over her. I have set it at minimum settings. She can't attack me or other party members. That is all. Hell, I even fixed her left hand that was broken by her noble half-brother that sold her into slavery. So, get off your high horse and get some reality. Surrender. Naruto then raised his voice, "Don't do it, bitch." The audience noticed mine coming out of the hallway. Naruto then asked loudly, "How long do I need to pin him for?" Alt-Gray scowled and said, "I guess we can call it a win." A voice announced, "Winner by pinning Shield Hero." The murmurs in the crowd were disappointing. Naruto got up and offered Motoyasu a hand, which was smacked away by the spear. Naruto scowled and began to walk away. He turned to see Motoyasu stab him in the chest with his spear. Sylvie screamed, "Naruto! No!" Naruto's eyes turned red and he grabbed the spear. Blood was coming out of his mouth and he coughed. Naruto then said, "Wrong move, asshole." The green gem on the shield became red. Naruto pulled the spear out of his chest and said, "Sore loser. You don't know what you've done." Naruto watched as he pulled Motoyasu's spear out of his chest. A text appeared in his view, "Curse series requirements met." Naruto stumbled backward as he knelt while coughing. Gritting his teeth, Jiraiya appeared in front of Motoyasu and looked at the man and said, "You've just asked to be killed by me." His teacher. A Rasengan appeared in his hand and Motoyasu jumped back. Jiraiya was quicker and hit him in the chest with the jutsu. Motoyasu hit the wall. A round impression appeared around where he hit. Jiraiya turned to his student and picked him up. He turned the king, who had a smirk on his face, and said, "This isn't over. We will be back." Sylvie disappeared, even though she was restrained, as did Raphlia, Millie, and Reno. Jiraiya pulled out a potion and gave it to Naruto. The pair disappeared in front of the crowd. No one noticed the smile that was on the Pope's face. Also, the restraints were left in a nice, neat pile on the chair that Sylvie had been sitting on. There was also a note, to the guards. "To those that groped me, savor having hands for you shall reap what you have sown." A dark shadow in the castle library gritted its teeth and its eyes glowed red. It then said, "Damn him. Damn them all." The group arrived just outside of the inn. Naruto's bleeding had slowed. Jiraiya and the girls moved quickly to get Naruto up and into the bed. Once inside the room the girls quickly pulled off his armor and threw it aside. They watched in fascination as the wound knitted itself closed. Sylvie noticed the red gem on the shield and said, "That doesn't look right." Naruto replied through gritted teeth, "Yes, the seal on the Kyuubi is loosened and now I have access to a new shield. Called the Rage Shield. It takes all my mental strength to keep it in line. I'm sorry." Sylvie quickly shucked off her armor and was in her undergarments. She laid down beside Naruto and hugged him gently and then her eyes changed to slits. She began to grit her teeth. She then said, "I will take some of this for you, because I love you, Naruto." He tried to smile and said, "Thanks, Sylvie-chan." She shifted on top of him and then bent down and kissed him passionately. Jiraiya sighed and said, "As good as this would be in one of my books. I need to do something." The pair became enveloped in an orange chakra cloak. He pulled out 2 small pieces of paper and placed one on each of their foreheads. They seemed to stop being in pain and the cloaks dissipated. He then looked at the shield which the gem had turned back to green. He sighed and handed the papers to Raphlia and said, "If they get frisky like that again, I mean turn orange, use those." Raphlia nodded and put the pieces of paper in pouch on her belt. She replied, "Yes sir." "Are they okay?" Jiraiya replied, "Yes, it was just Kyuubi chakra getting out and affecting them. I think the shield had something to do with this. I'm going to talk to the king about this and inform him about his little campaign against our little Naruto and that it has to stop or I'm going to stop him." The Gurus nodded as the man left the room. Motoyasu was sitting on a bench as a healer was casting a healing spell on him. He could not believe that Naruto had brought him down to 1/3 of his hit points with those attacks. Not to mention that the old guy who claimed to be his sensei hit him and took him down to single-digit hit points. These people weren't even his level and they hit harder than he did. His hit only did a quarter of Naruto's hit points, but it was a critical hit. He just couldn't lose. He was the hero. He should be the one to win and the one to free the maiden in distress. Itsuki and Ren had assured him that Mine had interfered with a wind magic spell, and what were those fire and water magic spells that Naruto used? They didn't seem to use the rules of this world. He had learned a couple from some crystal balls, but they were not as powerful. What was he also talking about him being an assassin? He wondered. Mine asked, "Are you okay, Motoyasu-sama?" Motoyasu coughed and replied, "Yeah, just wondering how Naruto got so strong." Mine replied angrily under her breath, "He's the devil of the shield." Motoyasu asked, "What did you say, Mine?" "She called my student, the devil of the shield." "Care to explain, or do you wish to die now for interfering in a duel?" Naruto's sensei explained, as he just appeared as if out of thin air. Mine bit her thumbnail and shook her head. Jiraiya pulled out a kunai and spun it into a reverse grip. "You will leave my daughter alone," Alt-Cray exclaimed. "I am Jiraiya, sage of Mount Maibaku, student of the 3rd Hokage, a member of the Sannin, sensei of the 4th Hokage, and of Naruto Uzumaki. Now, as I've promised, I'm back. Tell me why your daughter thought it was a wise idea to interfere in a duel? Then we'll get to why she lied about the rape charge against my student. I also swear if she tries to lie, I will end her before your archers can draw a breath," Jiraiya explained. Alt-Cray was aghast at the gall of this man. He then exclaimed, "You think that you can come into my kingdom and threaten me and my daughter?" Mine giggled and smiled. She then said, "That's right, Papa." Jiraiya smiled and replied, "Yes, because you are just a concubine. While she loves you both. You are pushing this nation into war with other nations, and if I get angry, I might pull more from my world into this fight, and then your kingdom is a lost cause. Your wife will be more than angry with you. I gather that she is the type of woman that would kill you both to set an example and then kill herself out of guilt. Look, you have a..." Jiraiya sidestepped and grabbed the spear that would have impaled him. He then used a single hand and tossed Motoyasu into the 2nd floor of the stands. He looked up at the boy and said, "You're too young to fight me. Naruto has a better chance to beat me than you. Heck, from what I've seen, his team would wipe the floor of all the other so-called heroes." He then turned back to Alt-Cray and said angrily, "You do realize that your anger is misplaced. Putting it on Naruto is wrong and it will get you killed. If not by me, then either by Siltvelt or Shield Frieden at the very least. You are this close to war." He held his finger and thumb almost touching. Alt-Cray turned his head and said, "You don't understand." Jiraiya said, "Inform me and don't take your kingdom down and get your family sold into slavery. I hear that this one is close to being sold to Fabri as a slave wife. A fate worse than death, I hear. So, talk to me. Or you can die here by my hand and just end it." Alt-Cray sighed, as he watched Mine run off to deal with Motoyasu. He began, "It all started. Naruto wakes up in the familiar confines of the area of the Kyuubi seal, but there is another person there, Sylvie. She is lying there unconscious." Naruto glared at the fox and asked, "What do you want?" The fox chuckled and replied, "I didn't bring you here. That damnable shield of yours did. While it put a harder lock on the seal, it did also loosen the seal in a way." Naruto looked down and said, "The curse series." The fox laughed and replied, "Yes, the curse series." Naruto got down, rolled Sylvie onto her back and began to check her out. He asked, "Why is she here?" The fox replied, "She was injected with a little of my chakra and thus is affected by the shield and me. But I'm not the one you have to worry about." Naruto wore a look of surprise and heard his own voice behind him say, "We finally meet." Naruto turned to see a perfect copy of himself, but the pupils of the eyes were red and the silla was black. He asked, "Who are you?" "Yami," Naruto replied, "your darker self. That woman helped my power in ways I couldn't imagine in that idiot spear guy. Don't get me started. I'll fight you," Naruto declared. Yami replied with a smile, Now is not the time, and if you let down your guard I will take over. Bye, brother. Naruto began to fade away. Sylvie sat up when he was gone and looked at Yami and then at the cage. So, you're his darker half and you're the demon fox? Naruto woke up with Sylvie laying on his chest and an ache in his chest. Raphlia asked, "You're awake. How are you feeling?" "Like I had a spear pushed into my chest," he replied. Raphlia giggled and replied, "You did. Jiraiya told us to keep an eye on the two of you until he returns. You both went a little wild." Naruto looked a little dejected and murmured, "Kyuubi." Millie shook her head and replied, "Not only that, but your shield changed." Naruto sighed and replied, "Curse series." Rino asked, "Do you know anything about it?" Naruto brought up the shield tree and couldn't find it. He then looked into the help menu. No luck there either. He guessed it was locked unless he either used the Kyuubi chakra or was so angry that it was unlocked. He replied, "I can't tell you much. I can't find anything about it. It looks like it is locked and will not be accessible unless I use the Kyuubi chakra or get angry enough to lose control." Raphlia replied, "Jiraiya told us to make sure that that doesn't happen, since it will affect Sylvie too. He left these seals with me to help keep you both in line." She held up 2 seals. Naruto looked at the seals and explained, "Demon chakra suppression seals. Good call. I'm guessing that Sylvie being in this state of undress was her doing." Raphlia raised an eyebrow and said, "You explained more to us. You don't seem to remember. The shield is called the Rage Shield." Naruto sighed and said, "Thanks for the information, Raphlia." He looked up the information and then it became available, but seemed locked. He then said, "It looks like it is locked. I need to reach level 35. Sylvie woke with a start and sat up. She looked down at Naruto and then at the position she was in. She blushed red and it extended down to her chest. She asked tentatively, "Did I take something I shouldn't have?" Raphlia giggled and replied, "No, you, rabbit. You were stopped from being like a rabbit." Millie and Rino giggled at this. Sylvie glared at Raphlia and said, "Not funny, Tanuki." Naruto turned red and said, "Please stop shifting, Sylvie-chan." Sylvie gasped and exclaimed, "Sorry, Naruto-koi." She then laid down on his chest and closed her eyes. Raphlia looked on in surprise as Sylvie fell quickly asleep. She said, "That was quick." Millie replied, "It has been an exciting day for her and Naruto-kun." Raphlia nodded as she began to undress and got into a nightgown. She laid down beside Naruto on his left side. Millie and Rino followed suit. Millie pulled the blanket over Naruto and the pair of gears. Jiraiya opened the door just then and looked around the room. He sighed and saw Naruto asleep with Sylvie and Raphlia. He then explained, "I will be back in the morning to explain what will happen tomorrow afternoon." Rino nodded and replied, "Yes sir." She closed the door behind him and locked the door and window. A shadowy figure met with another shadowy figure. The feminine one said, "I dare say that you are moving against the king rather quickly." "He deserves it," the masculine-voiced one replied. "Would you like some help?" "I dare say," the female asked. The male eyes glowed purple and he replied, "Sure, but keep quiet. We need to make sure that this isn't found out for a few days." "As you wish." "I dare say," the female replied. The male shook his head and the pair headed deeper into the castle. Naruto woke up to having each hand grabbing something soft but firm. He squeezed and it produced 2 separate moans and 1 swishing tail. He recognized the tail as Raphlia's. He immediately released the soft mounds and opened his eyes. He looked down to see his hands had grasped an ass cheek of each of the girls. While he was sure that Sylvie wouldn't mind, he wasn't sure about Raphlia. Raphlia's eyes fluttered open and she smiled. She looked into his worried eyes. She asked, "What's wrong?" He replied, "I'm sorry." I squeezed without thinking. She reached back and found his hand and found that her gown had rode up during the night. She smiled and kissed him on the cheek. She said, "I'm sure that it was innocent. We can talk about going farther later. I figure that you will have several wives and I more than likely will be one of them. I do like you and am attracted to you, but not at the same level as Sylvie." Naruto sighed in relief and said, "I was afraid that you were going to hit me." Rafklia put her finger on his nose and said, I knew the possibilities of laying here in bed with you. Groping would be a possibility. It makes me happy that you told me that you did it and am sort of sad that you don't want to do it again. Naruto looked at the girl on his arm and said, I don't want you to think that I'm a pervert. Rafklia giggled and Naruto thought it was cute. She said, some perversion is fine. Just don't take it to the level of Master Jiraiya. She grabbed his hand and pushed it against her bottom. He gently squeezed and she moaned lightly. He asked, like that? She nodded and kissed him lightly on the lips. I really like Naruto-kun. He is gentle and will be a good husband, she said and kissed him again. She then rolled off the bed and said, too much will cause my hormones to run wild and we don't want that. Our rabbit just needs to be in bed with you for that to happen. Sylvie smiled and replied, not always. I can enjoy just being in his embrace. There was a knock on the door and then the lock was unlocked. The door opened and Jiraiya entered the room. He then said, good, you're up. He looked at Naruto and asked, feeling better? Naruto nodded. Jiraiya continued, good. You will get your reward this afternoon and more will be revealed. So, get ready and assemble the whole team. Except for Reno. Reno asked, why not me? Jiraiya replied, I have a job for you. You and my clone are going to cash in the supplies from the wave while the guards are busy at the castle. He then looked hard at Naruto and said, you had a clone in the castle. Didn't you? Naruto scratched the back of his head and replied, yeah. How did you know? I helped him, his helper, and their prize out of the city last night. Good job, Jiraiya replied happily. I would also go back to both the slave traders today and work your way to the village that the wave hit. Then spend a few days there. Then make a beeline for the border and if you can make it to Shield Frieden then do it. If not, then Siltvelt. Reno you are going with them. I want you to get at least 1 or 2 more hourglasses on that shield. Naruto nodded. He then said, I should also be able to find more types of monsters for my shields. Jiraiya nodded and explained, you will also be able to level up and then you can have class upgrades. I would also look into having a secondary job, like a merchant. It will bring in some extra money. Naruto looked at him in confusion and asked, why? We are making enough money right now. Jiraiya replied, I'm afraid that soon you will not have the support of this kingdom and no, it isn't because of the king. The church is looking like it might cause a coup. I was able to open the eyes of the king to several things last night that he was overlooking. The other possibility is an actual war with another nation. If he doesn't change his ways. What are you going to do, Master Jiraiya? Millie asked. Jiraiya replied, the usual. Get information. Naruto laughed and added, he will also peek at any naked women that he can. Jiraiya blushed and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, spoil sport. The room erupted in laughter. He left the room and the group got dressed. Jiraiya was waiting for them outside the room and they proceeded to breakfast. It was a quiet affair. Jiraiya and Reno went into an alley. Jiraiya left the alley, while Reno and a clone left the alley several minutes later. The rest of the group left for the castle and arrived in the throne room. Alt-Gray sat on his throne looking tired, as did several of his assistants. Motoyasu was glaring at Naruto and Jiraiya. Both seemed to not even notice. The girls just stood behind Naruto and Jiraiya. Itsuki and Ren stood in between Motoyasu and Naruto, with their teams behind them. Naruto could feel mind glaring a hole in the back of his head, but he didn't care. The king then began, thanks to the heroes for protecting us from the wave. We are here to give them their monthly stipend. I award the spear hero 3,500 silver pieces. I award the sword hero 3,400. I award the bow hero 3,300. I award the shield hero 4,900. This includes the agreed upon compensation for forcing him into the duel. I would also like to make a couple of apologies to the shield hero. First, it has been proven that he didn't attempt to rape the adventurer Mine, who by the way is my daughter. I would also like to apologize for not agreeing with him that it is true that slavery is a custom of this country. It is mostly carried out upon demi-humans, but also on humans. So, He is within his right to own slaves and should not be looked down upon for owning them. Lastly, I would also like to apologize for carrying my hatred for certain people who worship the shield hero and shifting that hatred upon Uzumaki. Motoyasu angrily exclaimed, "You don't have to apologize. He did try to rape mine. I mean Malty." Jiraiya asked, "Did she sleep with you that night?" Motoyasu looked at him in confusion and replied, "Yes." "What does that have to do with anything?" Jiraiya replied, "A woman that has just been through the traumatic event of rape wouldn't want to have sex right afterward with the first man available. She would have to have immense trust in you. That takes years to establish, and even then, it would be rare. She would be repulsed by the idea for days or weeks." Motoyasu exclaimed, "You lie." Jiraiya shook his head, "I have consoled many who have had to deal with this. Even in wartime, sex is the farthest from their minds. Comfort and understanding are what they want." Motoyasu continued to yell, "You're from a backwards world." Jiraiya looked at the boy and Motoyasu flinched. He then sternly explained, "My world is more advanced than this one but less advanced than yours. So, what do you have to say about that?" Motoyasu scowled but said nothing. Mine then exclaimed, "He did rape me." She then folded at the glare of the pair of seasoned shinobi. Naruto then explained, "I'm still a virgin." The atmosphere was becoming oppressive. Alt-Cray exclaimed, "Enough. This matter is decided. Naruto Uzumaki is innocent of rape. I will hear no more of this subject." He then glared at Malty and said, "Continue this and you push this country into war. Everyone is dismissed." The room quickly cleared. Alt-Cray sighed and cradled his head in his hand. He sighed and said, "This is going to be hard until the next wave." His advisor replied, "Yes sir, it looks that way." Outside of the castle, Motoyasu and his party was waiting for Naruto and his party. Naruto looked at the spear hero and asked, "What do you want, sore loser?" Itsuki and Ren had held back and were watching this meeting. Motoyasu angrily exclaimed, "You cheated in the duel. I should have won. I was higher level. Everyone knows that the one with the higher level wins." Naruto chuckled and asked, "So, in the game rock, paper, scissors, who wins? The one with the higher level?" Motoyasu shook his head and replied, "What does that have to do with it?" Naruto asked, "You are a spearman. I am a shielder and a shinobi. Dual class. Shield cancels spear. Shinobi beats spear. I beat you years of life and death. Combat experience? I have over 3. You've maybe got a month of light combat experience. Speed, strength, and power. I also have you beat in combat experience. You've got how many?" Motoyasu shook his head and said, "Even so, you should have fought fair and square." Naruto cocked his head to the side and asked, "Fair and square? What do you mean by that? Just let you win? That isn't a fight or a duel. That is just letting you win and not what a duel is. A duel is a test of our martial prowess, of which you are lacking. I'm guessing that you've taken the easy way to get experience." "I work for what I have. I've worked for what I have," Motoyasu exclaimed. Naruto chuckled and said, "I bet you've had it easy with women and in life." Motoyasu blushed and then shook his head. He then exclaimed, "You know nothing about me." Naruto shrugged and nodded. He admitted, "You're right and you know even less about me. I'll give some clues. I've killed doing my job as a shinobi. Your life in your world probably meant that you didn't need to kill other humans to survive." Motoyasu scowled and said, "You're evil. You killed people." Jiraiya shook his head and replied, "If he didn't, he would be dead. In our world, it is part of life to kill or be killed. While it is monsters right now, it may change to be people later on. Don't forget that." Motoyasu laughed and said, "You don't know anything, old man." Naruto touched his chest and then said, "You were ready to kill me. Even though you lost to me. Do you understand that losing me will hurt our chances to stop these waves?" Motoyasu shook his head and exclaimed, "You know nothing." Naruto shook his head and said as he walked past the spear hero, "I used to hate reading, but you can learn a lot from books. Go read a few books and learn about the history of this country and planet. Motoyasu got angry and attempted to thrust his spear in Naruto's back, only for Naruto to turn and catch the tip in between his index and middle fingers. He pulled the spear past himself and punched the man in the face. This sent him back a good 20 yards. Naruto waved to Itsuki and Ren with a smile on his face. Naruto and his party headed into the center of town and Itsuki and Ren lost sight of the group. They looked at the crumpled form of Motoyasu. Ren then said, "I think that Naruto does have a point. We haven't attempted to do much reading or learn about this world." Itsuki shook his head and walked off while saying, "We will do what we need to do. Motoyasu is just an idiot and should just steer clear of Naruto." Ren looked at the group of girls fawning over Motoyasu and shook his head. He and his group also left the area. Naruto and his group entered Bilka's tent. The man looked as gleeful as ever and exclaimed, "Good to see you, good shield hero. To what do I owe this visit?" Naruto replied, "I was looking for another slave." Bilka smiled and said, "Well, thanks to you my supply is low." "What levels are you looking for?" Naruto replied, "Around mid-30s. Bilka laughed and smiled widely. He then said, "I'm sorry, but my stock in that range is non-existent at the moment." Naruto sighed and asked, "What do you have?" Bilka smiled and replied, "I do have several in the high 50s and the one before at level 80. Naruto shook his head and said, "I want them to work their way up with us." He then noticed a box of eggs. He then pointed at the box and asked, "What is that?" Bilka laughed and replied, "That, my boy, is an egg lottery. For 100 silver you can try your luck at getting a monster. If you win the jackpot you can get a dragon and it is worth 20 gold. Naruto chuckled and said, "What the heck?" Raphlia frowned at Naruto and said, "You shouldn't have bought 2 eggs. It was a waste of money." Jiraiya shook his head and replied, "You don't know this boy. His luck is either going to be double dragon good or he will get 2 duds. I am betting on double dragons. I once saw him do a lottery and win the grand prize with a single ticket." Naruto chuckled and said, "We need to go visit your girlfriend, Irusnin. We then visit the apothecary and then Erhard. After that, we head to loot. Reno, you can ride on my back." Reno had just tried to sneak up on Naruto and replied with a sigh, "Okay. How do you do that?" Naruto chuckled and replied, "Sensor, good hearing, and watching the other's eyes." The others giggled at the antics of Naruto and Reno. The group headed to the witch's shop. The witch greeted them as they entered, "Greetings shield hero and party." "Oh, hello Jiraiya." Jiraiya smiled and said, "Hello, Ezra. We're here to buy some magic books." Ezra smiled and replied, "I'm impressed that you've read and learned all those spells from the grimoires." Naruto replied, "As you said. If we work hard, we can learn any spell if we apply ourselves." Ezra smiles wide and raises her fist. She then exclaims, "You bet young man." She turns to Jiraiya and asks, "Are we on for tonight?" Jiraiya replies, "Yes, but I do have to leave after tonight and work on getting information for Naruto." Ezra blushes and says, "Look around and any books you want I will sell you at a discount." Naruto smiled and replied, "That isn't required. Girls, we need level 2 fire, lightning, healing, illusion, water, light and darkness grimoires." The girls replied in unison, "Right," and moved around the shop. Jiraiya and Naruto made small talk with Ezra while the girls searched for books. After about 45 minutes Ezra said, "That will be 3,800 silver." Naruto looked at her and asked, "Are you sure?" "I was sure it would be more than 5,000. Ezra nodded and replied, "I'm sure. I know that you'll be back and I'm going to get some more books for you especially. I noticed you got some books on our neighbors. That is a good idea. I wish you luck in their lands." Naruto handed over a bag of silver and replied, "Here's your silver, and thanks for all the help. We will be back around the next wave and hopefully with some more help." She smiled warmly and said, "Of that, I have no doubt. Good luck young Naruto and take care of those girls." Naruto smiled and waved. He and the group left the shop and he replied, "I will." The next stop was the apothecary. He picked up some new equipment and better tools for making potions. The apothecary was sad to see Naruto and his group leave Melmormark, but was happy that they would return for the next wave more prepared. The final stop was at Erhard's shop. The group entered and Erhard asked, "So what can I do for you?" Naruto replied, "I would like to have you set on retainer for upgrading our weapons and armor when we return. We need some new weapons and some upgrades right now. We also need some repairs." Erhard looks them over and replies, "Give me a couple hours and I should be done with the repairs. You can take the new stuff out of my stock and we will negotiate when all is said and done." Naruto nodded and said, "Sounds good." Everyone in civilian clothes. It took about 10 minutes for everyone to change out of their armor and set it on the counter. The group left the shop and they took the eggs to a tavern for lunch.